Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away. Yeah. Let's go off the grid.
Hello and welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast about reclaiming our attention from the algorithms. I'm your host, Amelia Fruby, and last fall, I published a book called Your Attention is Sacred Except on Social Media. I wrote this book after years of being off of social media and making this podcast where I have spoken with hundreds of people about their experiences of these apps and platforms that have reshaped contemporary life. And from those conversations, I created this manifesto to help all of us release the reasons we think we should be on social media and reinvest in our life and work offline. A beautiful side effect of publishing a book about this is that I've been invited into some amazing conversations around the topics of attention, scarcity, algorithms, and small business. And today, I wanted to share part of one of those conversations with you. A few weeks ago, I joined Jenni Gritters and her community for a book club about my book, and we had such a great conversation about how our attention is impacted by the internet. We talked about understanding the goals of different algorithms, using addiction as a lens to make sense of social media. Jenni shared more about her decision to delete her Instagram account, even though it definitely brought her clients and made her money in her business. We also talked about the parallels between fractured attention and financial scarcity and how to protect your well-being if you're still on social media as these platforms become more and more combative and harmful to our mental health. I'm so grateful to Jenni for hosting me and to everyone who joined our book club. And in this episode, you'll get to hear some of their voices as we have a really open conversation about all of these themes. As always, I am so grateful that you, dear listener, are tuning in to Off the Grid today. And with this one, I would love to invite you to purchase a copy of my book if you have not yet. You can find it on my website at offthegrid.fun/attention, or you can purchase it anywhere you get your books. It's available through major retailers around the world in paperback, ebook, and audiobook editions. So however you like to read, Your Attention is Sacred should be available to you, and I would truly appreciate your support by purchasing a copy of the book. Before we hear my conversation with Jenni and friends, I also want to let you know that I will be doing a book event in person in San Francisco in March. If you are in the Bay Area, I would love if you would come join me at Blackbird Bookstore on Thursday, March 12th. I will be there from 7 to 9 p.m. local time to talk about my book and be in conversation with the brilliant Sarah Fontaine of Existing Together and Actually People. The event is totally free. There will be a reading, a Q&A, and even a little interactive exercise. And I'm really just so honored and excited to be able to do this. So again, if you're in the Bay Area, I would love to see you on Thursday, March 12th at Blackbird Bookstore and Cafe. And if you're not in the Bay Area, I would be happy to bring my book to a store, shop, or event space near you. Please do reach out with event invitations anytime. I do travel. I carry books with me. I also do virtual events like this book club with Jenni. So I'm very much here to continue and expand these conversations around sacred attention. And I would love to talk to you and your community. For now, let's dive into my conversation with Jenni Gritters all about why our attention is sacred and why she left Instagram.
I'm super excited to invite Amelia into our space today. We are going to book club. So this is very much a fireside chat. If you've been to book club with me before, you know these are great discussions, and usually kind of they take us somewhere that none of us planned. So I have some loose questions prepared, but we're really just going to kind of like let this be an open-ended conversation that feels honestly quite apt. These questions about how do we use our attention? How are we interacting with social media platforms? Like kind of could not be more pertinent this week. So our guest today is Amelia. Amelia is a writer, a podcaster, a professor, a community organizer, and she wrote the book that we're talking about today, Your Attention is Sacred Except on Social Media. And yeah, I read this book a while ago. Amelia and I traded books because we published our books around the same time and had been wanting to bring this conversation to y'all just because it's something that comes up so often in our teachings, in our conversations together. So, Amelia, will you give us a little spiel about kind of like what is your work currently like at the moment? What do we need to know?
I did a PhD in philosophy and I taught at a university for years. And then I left academia and started my own business. I started a podcast production company called Softer Sounds that I've been running full time for about 5 years now. I've been a freelance audio editor for about 10. And my business changed pretty dramatically last year. And as we start 2026, I'm really focused on my podcast, Off the Grid, Leaving Social Media, and my membership community and small group programs kind of full time. So right now, really all of my work is about stepping back or away from big tech in some capacity. I'm someone who's quit Instagram almost 5 years ago now. I don't use Amazon for things as much as possible. My business is totally set up without Google. So I'm really here to divest from those tools and platforms and to say that I'm not trying to say you have to also, just that I want to create this path of possibility and you get to choose if you walk down it. And I wrote a book, as Jenni said. It's my book, Your Attention is Sacred, Except on Social Media. So we'll talk about all that today, I imagine.
Yes, I love it. I closed my Instagram account last week, my personal one. And so I'm very much on this train of like reclaiming my own focus, right? And understanding that maybe I want more depth versus fractured attention. So, like I said, such an apt conversation. And I think, with all the news about TikTok and everything this week, truly more and more people are going to be going this direction. So, Amelia, I'd love to talk a little bit about how this book idea came into being. Will you walk us through why this book? Why now? How did it come in? How did you work on it and why? Why was this the moment? Because you've been working on this body of work for a while, I know.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know much about my background with this, I left social media in April of 2021. Before that, I was a micro influencer. I did brand deals. I guess I was sort of in the body positivity space, so like with underwear companies. And also, I did some work with Bando around their planners and different sorts of cute things. I sold some courses. I self-published and then traditionally published a book. And I used Instagram to sell all of that. I was like all in on Instagram. I cannot state that enough. And it was never my full-time job because I didn't have enough followers, but that's where it began for me. Like I was really there. And through a series of just like disillusionments, my book didn't do as well as I hoped, even though I invested so much money on social media because my publisher and agent told me to. My emotional well-being there was just like tanking. I felt bad every time I logged on. And the combination of those realizations helped me leave the platform in spring of 2021. A year later, I started my podcast Off the Grid because people kept asking me how I was running a business without social media. Like, I like to say that, like, in 2021, I moved to States, got my PhD, adopted 2 dogs, got engaged, and all anyone wanted to ask me about was how I left social media. Like, those life milestones, irrelevant. Getting off of Instagram, that was like the impossible thing no one could imagine. And that feels a little funny to say now when so many people are questioning and leaving these platforms. But 5 years ago, it was such a big thing. After I ran the podcast for a few years, I noticed that I had a really clear point of view on social media and attention. So I had recorded 3 years and over 100 episodes of conversations around this topic. And I had this funny thing happen halfway through 2024 where I started inviting guests on and then like interrupting them and being like, wait, I don't think that's it. I don't think that's right. I don't know if I agree, like more than I want it to be. And that was a clue to me, like, oh, what the guest is saying is great. That's all fine. We have a different view on this. But my point of view is strong enough that I think I really need to write it down. I really need to articulate this. Like, I am no longer just in conversation around these topics. Like, I have something to say. And so I let that realization sort of simmer for a few months. And as it did, I started to get a sense of like, okay, this is going to be the first chapter, and this is what is most important next. And I looked back through the episodes I had made and I thought about like, which were the ones that people really loved? What really landed? What are the things they're repeating back to me? Then I really knew I had to write a book. So at that point, I carved out the space. I went to a hotel for a week in January of last year and I wrote the whole first draft of the book. It's only about 100 pages, so that was not like a huge amount, but it was ready because I had been thinking about it for so long. I had been actively podcasting about it for 3 years, and it just needed to be written down. So that's like why now for me. And then why now for the world? I mean, you all can fill in those gaps. I feel like that feels
Yeah.
obvious.
So interesting, Amelia. I was like in sort of a parallel path to you. I was reporting, I was a journalist back in 2018, 2019, and I wrote this very popular piece about the mental health of influencers. And it was one of the first pieces that people had, like the first time somebody had actually kind of like talked to. I talked to like 10, 15 influencers. I looked at all this data about what happens when you spend more time on Instagram, and also then what happens when you can't change because your whole identity has to remain stable to sell the thing that you're trying to sell. And a couple of the people that I interviewed have since left. Lee Tilgman is a big influencer name. She like wrote a book about leaving. And so it's just really interesting. I think you were like doing that walk away around the same time that a lot of people were going like, wait, maybe this isn't as good as it looks. Like,
Yeah.
definitely not as good as it looks at all. So, yeah. And I actually love the length of this book too. It's like mine is shorter, it's accessible, and it's kind of like takes everything in our brain share and just like plunks it into one place. So, but let's open up the floor. I would love to just hear from you all kind of your big aha moments or things that hit.
I loved this book because one, I guess it was just extra validation because I've had this feeling lately of I haven't felt the need to consume much on social media. I kind of hate Instagram. LinkedIn's my jam because I like long form writing, but I feel like I've been more interested in creating content rather than consuming it. And that feels backwards as well. A little bit of just like I'm expecting other people to consume my content, but I don't want to consume any other ones either. But it was really, really fascinating on like how it's shifted. And especially like I was around when Facebook started, when you still had to have a college email for it. And then I got in on the Facebook or the high school one because I was a senior and all my friends were in college and I couldn't interact with them. And so having that goal for social media, the goal of the algorithm, that's probably my point. I really enjoyed that. If you go into it with a goal, great. But that's when you lose the sight of the goal, that's when it kind of becomes an issue.
I don't know if you know this about me, Amelia, but my first job was at Upworthy. Literally, my whole job was to game the algorithm. I was brought into journalism, the clickbait. And so it is interesting. I think a lot of you in this room, we were kind of raised at the cusp of this professionally to some degree. And so it is a really interesting, I think, Casey, the like, why? Why do it? It's what I'm always asking my clients. Like, you want to go viral? Why? I mean, like, if you want to go viral for a reason, great. But like, why? You know? Okay, what else stood out to y'all about this book?
I think, like a lot of us, I've been having this inkling of like, social media has taken a turn. It is just in this place where it feels too addictive and too dark. And to be contributing to the platforms doesn't feel right. And I'm wondering if you intentionally avoided talking about addiction language, or that was something that is not a part of what you're thinking about in this moment. But to me, what really stood out and what is standing out, and maybe this is just where I'm coming from, from social work backgrounds and whatnot, is the addiction component and how we as consumers are really being, I don't know what the word is, taught to come back again and again to these platforms in a way that is very addictive and very hard to leave. And part of the leaving is not so much making a conscious choice about leaving, but about understanding how addiction works and how understanding dopamine and understanding our own capacity to control or not control what our behavior is, and almost coming to a bigger realization around agency and these platforms. And I don't know what my question is, but I'm just wondering if you see the bigger questions around agency and choice when it comes to addiction to these platforms?
Yeah. In brief, like, absolutely. I think that addiction is a lens through which to understand our relationships to social media. And I think that there are like very nuanced conversations to be had about the relationship between addiction and agency, right? How does addiction impact our agency? How do we reclaim agency amidst addiction or on addictive platforms? Like, what does that mean? I think for me personally, like, addiction is not part of my experience. And I was a philosopher, not a scientist. So, like, the neurobiology of addiction is not in my expertise. I have read some of the books like Dopamine Nation that's specifically about dopamine loops and addiction, or some of even the social media books. I think that like Johann Hari's Stolen Focus or even Chris Hayes' Siren Call do have chapters with an addiction lens. So I want to affirm that I think that is real and true and important. Something I have found is that as I have spoken to so many people who want to leave or have left social media, right? 3 years of making this podcast, over 100 recorded conversations about it, so many more in my memberships and things. Everyone has to find their own way in. And so for some people, the addiction lens like is the one that makes sense and like opens up this experience for them or like clarifies. It's like the light bulb. I'm always like looking for like what was your light bulb around why you had to leave social media? Addiction is that for some people. For me, it actually came more through attachment theory and codependency. I had a very clear moment with Instagram where at the start of 2021, I made a really long list of my rules for Instagram for that year about when I would log on, when I would delete the app, what I would respond to, how locked down my DMs would be, all of these things. And after I finished the list, I reread it and I was like, this looks just like the boundary list from that toxic codependent relationship I was in that I worked on with my therapist. And I had this like light bulb moment where I was like, oh, this is just that again. And for me, that was enough. Like I had been through the therapeutic process to unhook from that relationship with other human beings and seeing that was enough to like get off of social media. It was a real clear aha moment. So that was kind of my lens. For other people, there's like a very clear political values lens. Once they've seen how Meta has impacted, genocides and wars around the world, or maybe read Shoshana Zuboff's Surveillance Capitalism book, and for some people, that like political misalignment or the reality of like the surveillance and the violence that happens on platforms, that's the like light bulb moment that gets them to reevaluate and leave or like change their behavior on the platform. So, yeah, I love that you're bringing in addiction. And I think it's important to have many lenses on this such that like people have a sort of different, everyone can have their way of reevaluating the relationship and the use of these platforms. And if you want a book that really brings in addiction, I will just recommend my friend Cody Cook Parrott has a book coming out called The Practice of Attention. And Cody writes a lot about addiction and their personal experience with it. And in that book, there is much more reference to addiction of many forms and how social media can be a part of that. So I can link to that in the chat. It's available for pre-order now.
So good and interesting. I think it is helpful to think that there's actually a library of ways in which people detach, right? There's kind of
Mhm.
that like final straw moment. It is interesting. I mentioned before I closed my Instagram account of like 14 years with like thousands of followers last week. And that was that moment you had is a similar moment I had of like, oh, this is actually really enmeshed. And when I look at the results that are being driven from Instagram, they're actually not really prominent in my business at all. Like that's something I had to
Mhm.
deal with, right? Like I kept telling myself, well, I need this, don't I? The answer to how I feel after having closed it is relieved, which is a really telling response, right? I thought I might feel regret. No, I just felt relieved. Like, oh, thank God no one's watching me anymore, you know? But it was a way to watch myself and try to understand myself. Like I would watch my own stories, right? And it was also kind of a former version of myself. So I think that enmeshment and the attachment style really resonates for me because it's something I've had to work through with money, with my parents, with my romantic relationships, and with my clients. So why wouldn't it apply to social media as well? Like, yeah, it's fascinating. Amelia, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about, I love the philosophy and the root words and all of that. It's how my brain works too. The idea that attention has been linked to, right, the word economy puts scarcity in attention, but you kind of pushed back on that and said, like, well, maybe it's not so linear, right? Like maybe attention is actually something that can't be measured in that way. Can you just talk a little bit more about that for us and kind of like the different lens instead of it being like a 1+1 = 2 with attention? It felt like you were suggesting something different.
Yeah.
What is your suggestion of how else we can see attention?
So, my real goal for the first chapter of the book is to help us all start to question the concept or the ubiquitousness of the concept of the attention economy. I think that the attention economy is a great way to describe how our attention is bought, sold, and traded on social media apps and platforms. I think it's useful in that context. But in a world so permeated by social media, I think that the attention economy has been the entire way we understand attention, has like eclipsed all other understandings of attention sometimes. Or at the very least, some of the premises inside of the attention economy have come to be how we understand attention. So let me try to be more specific. Like in our definitions of economics contemporarily, it's really about the distribution of scarce resources. Like scarcity is definitionally our understanding of economics. That has not always been true, and it is not always true for everyone. But if you looked at, I cite in the book, like the American Association of Economists, that's how they define it, is through scarcity, how we distribute scarce resources. This is a very like capitalist, neo-capitalist way of understanding economics. And so if we understand our attention through an economic lens, we're just always going to believe it's scarce. There's been this slippage. It's like I need a better word than slippery, but that's how I feel about it. It's like when we started combining these different concepts, some of the like tenets and values of one became true of the other. But I don't think our attention is inherently scarce. I understand why it feels scarce. I understand why we talk about being distracted. I understand why it feels hard to focus. But I think that at like the level of our human experience, attention is abundant. It comes in infinite forms. It's available to us in so many ways, and it's immeasurable. And so I believe that if we can't measure it, it can't be scarce inherently. And again, it can feel that way. I'm not trying to deny anyone's experience of that, but I don't think it necessarily or fundamentally is that way. And I think the way people talk about the attention economy is like attention is fundamentally, inherently scarce. And that's why we all suck at focusing. And I'm like, no, focus feels hard. One, because it's only one mode of attention and it doesn't even have to be the best one. And two, because our attention has been manipulated and marketed on these platforms.
I mean, it's so fascinating to me. It's the way I've been teaching money lately that like money is actually abundant, but we've been taught it's scarce. And so we go about every process of getting money with a grasp because we've been taught that there's not enough of it. Do we have a distribution problem? Absolutely. Right. But like, and there's a reason why we believe that, but it's similar. I mean, our attention is a resource, just like money is a resource. What are the other forms of attention? So you said focus is one. How else does attention show up?
I really like to insist on a very like neuro-affirming approach to attention. So I think attention can be deep focus. I think attention can be multitasking. I think attention can be fleeting. I think that for some people it feels good. Like for me personally, I love to like listen to a podcast while I read a book. For other people, that's like impossible or like doesn't work with their brain. But all of that is attention. Attention is just how we turn our consciousness toward the world. It's what we choose to interact with or what chooses to interact with us and how we engage that. And so I think there's so many modes. And I have like a extended footnote in the back of the book about my like beef with flow states, which is I love being in flow as an artist and creative person. It's great. But I've read all the attention books out there, and a lot of them seem to create a hierarchy of types of attention. And it's like distracted, scrolling attention is at the bottom, and flow state, deep focus, deep work is at the top. And I think that hierarchy is so false. Like, I don't think that the goal of reclaiming our attention is to be in flow as much as possible. I actually think it's to experience the diversity and multiplicity of attention. And so, yeah, scrolling and numbing out, that's one form of attention. I would love if we approach that intentionally, but I want to have an approach to attention that doesn't like demonize or rank different ways of being with the world.
This is so fascinating to me. I really love hearing you talk about it. When I was working at Upworthy, we were completely beholden to the Facebook algorithms, right? And so they would like lay off whole teams because now we're focusing on video. And then it was like being on, I mean, you were a cork in the waves. There was nowhere to land. And I think that has deeply impacted my perspectives on all of this of like, sure, if you want to consciously use these places as a doorway in to your business, do it. But like if you are at the behest of the constant changes for your sales, that feels dangerous to me. Like get people onto your own platforms, please, for the love of God. Amelia, if people are choosing to stay and use these platforms consciously, that's my last question for you. I'd love to just hear, I love when you use that phrase kind of like gardening attention, right? The ecology of attention. If you're choosing intentionally to stay, how do people do that and maintain well-being?
I mean, I think that some of it is just recognizing and reckoning with the fact that the platform's goal is in some ways to make you feel unwell. Because the more it agitates and activates you, the more likely those algorithms has learned you are to keep scrolling. And so I didn't used to say it this way, but I almost feel like if you want to be there, you have to recognize that there's a bit of like a combative experience happening between you and the platform owners by way of the algorithm. And so this is where I think having boundaries is really important. It's where I think knowing what is your goal here and does it align with what this algorithm is doing? That's what the second chapter of my book is about. Like, don't just assume that social media is like a neutral or benevolent place that wants to help you grow an audience, because it isn't and it doesn't. Maybe you do need access to many professional workers across industries, and you're like, LinkedIn is going to give me that. So I think just making sure that when you are using social media, you have boundaries intact, your goals align with the platform's goals, and it does feel like a genuinely productive place for you to be, for your business, checking in with that regularly, having any kind of metric for success for like, what do I want from this? Not seeing audience growth as a goal in and of itself, but how does that plug into your ultimate business goals? Those are things that I would recommend, at least for like helping the platforms benefit you as much as they might be harming you in that process.
Yeah, it's like put them in their right place with correct boundaries. Yeah, it's funny the decision to close my Instagram. I've been talking to people about this a lot, and it's such a fascinating thing because rationally it doesn't make sense for me to close that, and yet intuitively and body-wise it was exactly the right move. And so sometimes I think it takes getting quiet enough. It takes a pause to ask these questions, right? If you're just sort of like reactive, you're just going to keep showing up. So it really feels like it's tied to that conversation. The other thing I might drop in here is I think a lot of you here, Amelia, I consider you this way as well, are visionaries. You're a little bit ahead and you're highly sensitive. So you tend to feel these shifts happening a little bit before everybody else. And if I could say anything to you, it's trust it. Like, I don't think these platforms are going to be the silver bullet that they were once taught to be. I mean, they haven't been for a while, let's be honest, but I think they're going to be even less so. So if you're feeling a pull to be more connected, to do your marketing in a different way, it's hard. You're not going to see as many examples of that. I think that's why I love Amelia's work, because it gives you a lot of examples, but you're allowed to trust that instinct. It's not wrong. So yeah, it's not wrong at all. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Amelia. This is so helpful. Highly, highly recommend Amelia's podcast and just following along with what she's teaching and building, in the communities she has where there's actually a lot of people doing this very work of divesting from the powers that be, which we all need more of this year. So thank you, Amelia. I so appreciate you and your time.
Thanks, Jenni. Thanks, everyone. I'm really grateful for you and your questions.
I kind of hate social media, feeds on my brain like a bacteria. If you read my Wikipedia, it'll say I kind of hate social media. Post a picture of myself, sacrifice my mental health, use your product, time to sell. I would rather go to hell.
That was an abridged version of Social Media by Surfer Boy and Rectangle. To hear the entire song, find Surfer Boy on Spotify or head to the link in the show notes. Thanks so much to them for sharing the song with us, as well as to Melissa Caitlin Carter, who sings our theme song that you hear at the start of every show. I'm your host, Amelia Fruby, and if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you will download the free Leaving Social Media Toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. Until next time, I will see you off the grid.